Defense News. It's proudly sponsored by Navy Federal Credit Union. If you're a member of our nation's armed forces, the Department of Defense, or if your family is, we'd be proud to serve you too.
On this episode of Defense News Weekly, we get exclusive access to one of the Army's top tech development centers. Come with us inside the Natick Soldier Systems Center. Plus, counter-drone technology increasingly relies on directed energy weapons. We talked to a developer on what's the latest in that field and what's being learned from the fight in Ukraine. Also, at the White House, President Biden awarded 4 Medals of Honor for heroism in the Vietnam War. Plus, our correspondent looks at some of the more interesting provisions of the 2023 military fiscal plan. With the latest in news and analysis from the Pentagon to the platoon, this is Defense News Weekly. Welcome back to Defense News Weekly. I'm Daniel Woolfolk. The Army is always looking for new technology, gear, and emerging research to equip soldiers and help craft a better fighting force. A lot of that work gets done at the U.S. Army Soldier Systems Center in Natick, Massachusetts. It's a top-end research and development facility and home to the Combat Capabilities Development Command Soldier Center. Earlier this year, we got access to the facility and we looked at some of the latest research and testing going on and brought back the first in our new Future Soldier series. It's a story about an advanced mannequin that suffers all kinds of heat and cold exposure so real troops don't have to sweat it out. It's a mannequin with a K, not the ones you see at the mall. And here's how they get used up in Natick.
Have you ever wondered who designs the clothing that keeps soldiers alive and mobile in extreme weather? Well, Military Times senior editor Sarah Sicard and I recently visited the labs at the United States Army Research Institute of Environmental Medicine in Natick, Massachusetts. There, we got to see the science behind the uniforms.
So where are we today?
Okay, we're at the United States Army Research Institute of Environmental Medicine, or USAREM, in Natick, Massachusetts, and we're currently in a thermal mannequin laboratory.
Great, and can you explain what that is?
Okay, so this is a thermal mannequin. Traditionally, they used to be copper mannequins, so some people still use that terminology, but now it's a fiberglass epoxy resin with embedded heaters. So this is basically a tool we use to measure clothing data properties.
And why is he sweating right now?
Okay, so that's one of the tests that we do. So we do 2 tests. We do an insulation test, and then we do a vapor permeability test. So part of the vapor permeability test is that make sure that the whole skin is 100% saturated. So that's where the sweating function comes in. What
are some of the projects that you're working on right now?
Okay, so we've been dealing with a lot of cold weather clothing. New prototypes for cold weather clothing. There's always different layers and different combinations of layers that we can test. Additionally, we've been working with wet clothing. So we want to characterize the effects of wet clothing on heat loss.
So is this your only mannequin?
No, it's not. So actually we have 4 similar mannequins to this, and then we also have separate mannequins for the head, the hand, and the foot, and those provide us more resolution, and we can look at smaller zones. So this mannequin has 20 separate zones. So the head is basically one zone, the hand is one zone, and the foot is one zone. So with our body part mannequins, we can look at smaller areas of the body. So for the hand mannequin, for example, we can just look at a single finger, which is beneficial for gloves. And same thing with the foot, we can just look at a toe section, which gives us more information than just looking at the whole foot. We have another lab upstairs with a couple different chambers. One of my colleagues is working on some cooling systems. So for soldiers that are wearing very occlusive uniforms, chem bio uniforms in hot environments, they need to be cooled, or otherwise they're going to end up with heat strokes. So we're evaluating cooling systems to keep soldiers cool. And on the other hand, we have interest in testing heated garments. So on the other side of when you're in cold environments, you might need additional help to keep the soldier keep the soldier warm, so we need to evaluate heated clothing and see what works best for the soldiers.
So tell me a little bit about how, regulating body temperature sort of translates into, product out on the field.
So basically, we look at standardized testing. So I'm sure you'll talk to some physiologists while you're here, and they can explain how the body temperature regulates. But basically, we're looking at properties of clothing and how that relates to regulating the human body temperature.
The Thermal Lab works with the Coast Guard and both use an interesting model to estimate the survival of a person going overboard. Different inputs can be changed, such as water temperature and clothing, and it helps estimate how long someone will stay alive after falling into the water.
We created this graph where there is some degree of uncertainty about what human inputs you use, what clothing they use, how turbulent the water is, we're basically going off of measurements that may not be precisely accurate of where the person overboard is, so there could be some discrepancy in water temperature and air temperature as well. So this gives you kind of a graph of possible survival times. So we're going to say at 9.8 hours in the water, according to these conditions, they're almost 100% still going to be alive. And then at about 19.8 hours, we're going to say they're most likely, even considering all variables, best case scenario, most likely they probably have not survived.
Back here at the nation's capital, recently President Joe Biden awarded 4 Medals of Honor for heroism for the Vietnam War in a rare joint ceremony at the White House.
They stood in the way of danger, risked everything, literally everything, to defend our nation and our values. However, not every service member has received the full recognition they deserve. Today, we're setting the record straight. We're upgrading the awards of 4 soldiers who performed acts of incredible heroism during the Vietnam conflict.
Recipients last week included Staff Sergeant Edward Kaneshiro, who fought off a North Vietnamese attack when his unit was assaulted in 1966. Spec 5 Dwight Birdwell, who took over a tank to help fend off an attack. Spec 5 Dennis Fuji, who took charge of a daring rescue after his medevac chopper was shot down in 1971. And retired Major John Duffy, who led a multi-day defense against overwhelming enemy numbers in Vietnam. Also, the House of Representatives confirmed recently that Herschel Woody Williams, a Marine who was the last living World War II Medal of Honor recipient, will lie in honor in the Capitol Rotunda. Williams died recently of natural causes. And that's it from the military this week. When we come back, an update on directed energy weapons development and what's being learned from the fight in Ukraine. Welcome back. The ability to knock drones out of the sky, or at least blind them from collecting information, is a key ability for modern fighting forces. The war in Ukraine has provided new insights on how pivotal this capability can be. To find out what's next in the field of lasers and high-powered microwaves on the battlefield, we talked to Gregory Quarles of Applied Energetics. Greg, thank you for coming on.
Thank you very much for having me today, Daniel.
You work in the directed energy field. Can you tell me what kind of the state of the world of directed energy right now? Where did this battlefield stand when it comes to directed energy?
Well, currently the congressional appropriations have been running, I think this year is around 1.1 billion, a little bit more than 1.1 billion in the U.S. We know that our adversaries are also working diligently on directed energy. Our NATO allies, Israel is putting a lot of funding into their directed energy program. Other countries, large and small, China and Russia, obviously been working in the directed energy realm for 50, 60 years since the advent of the laser over 60 years ago. So it's a well-funded area, but we're just now seeing insertion into battle space of directed energy platforms that are coming in multiple units.
And when we talk about directed energy, essentially talking about lasers, right?
It's lasers and it's high power microwave. I think those two. On the laser side, it's CW, as well as the work we're doing in ultra short pulse lasers. And then there's also the work taking place with high power microwaves to try to jam the electronics on some of these sensor platforms.
And we don't hear too much about directed energy. Every once in a while we hear about a contract or something, but it doesn't come out on the news that much. Are we where we're supposed to be when it comes to using our directed energy tools?
I think we're getting there. I mean, it's taken the last 20 years for funding in the current CW solid state platforms that the U.S. has been working on. Other countries have been funding it fairly heavily as well as a portion of their government budgets, and they're trying to get things into protect their national security as well. But I think that the U.S., and we're now starting to see both high power microwave and CW systems put in as programs of record so that they're being purchased in multiple quantities. And we're seeing more funding put into next generation threat defeat, such as the ultra short pulse technology.
You mentioned CW. I'm not familiar with that acronym.
Okay, that's continuous wave. So that's a laser that you turn on and it stays on the entire time that you're trying to lock onto your target. Those systems are very high power, upwards of greater than 100 kilowatts. They lock on, and their primary mission is to burn through the target, whether that be the outside of a missile, whether that be the outside of a UAV. It's to lock on and burn through and destroy the aerodynamic stability of that threat. So they use that to try to take down the entire threat, but it does take a while to lock and target that.
And right now, it seems like directed energy is mostly being used to take down other threats, drones, missiles, that kind of thing?
Yes, it's being used primarily for defense of our national security. It's being used for defensive troops of maritime platforms, air platforms. It's to defeat incoming missiles, incoming drones, incoming any kind of munitions that may be launched that has a sensor on it or can be taken down with a beam of light or of microwaves.
And earlier we were talking, before we started rolling here, about Ukraine. What's going on in Ukraine within this realm, and what are we learning?
I think we're learning that it's not going to be just standoff and fire long-range missiles. It's going to be eyes on the ground and trying to see where the threats are moving. So it may be military hardware, it may be platforms, it may be aircraft, and using something like a drone or a UAV or an air-based platform to be in the sky and looking down to see where these targets are, whether it's with bolometers that are sensors that detect the heat given off, or whether it's visible or infrared sensors to try to see what is there and be able to target a counter launch to try to take that out. It's very important. So when you have something similar to what is being developed in the United States and other countries, which is laser beams and microwave, which can take down threats. If you want to keep the enemy from knowing where you're at, you need to blind the enemy. And I don't mean the personnel, I mean the UAV or the sensor that's on the aircraft that's flying over trying to sense where you're at to get your GPS coordinate. So you're really trying to find ways to counter the ISR that's on these platforms, destroy them so that they can't actually sense where you're at. And you're using the ISR yourself to target the GPS coordinates of where your next launch of munitions may be. So being able to use directed energy to either take down the aircraft or the drones, such as using microwave or high power lasers, or be able to blind them with ultra short pulse lasers or CW lasers, is an important step to trying to defeat that part of the threat that's out there currently. And you're seeing a lot of use of drones, especially from the Ukrainian side. They've really mastered the use of off-the-shelf components to try to put technology in the sky so that their people can move around covertly and be able to get to the threats that are out there.
Directed energy, is that big, heavy technology, or is it something that someone in Ukraine they're really savvy with their technology, with their small technology, is it something they'd be able to plug and play?
That's what we're looking at. I mean, when we look at the directed energy platform, if you will, again, we're looking at using high power microwave, or looking at using these continuous wave high power lasers, but also plug and play with something like our ultra short pulse technology that we're developing. And one of the reasons that we're really focused on that at Applied Energetics is because of the SWaP-C, the ability to reduce greatly the size, weight, and power of what's already out there in the field. So you can add this on as a portion of a layered defense and not impact the mobility of the platform that you're using.
What are you hearing from military leaders? What is it that they want on their ships, on their vehicles, on their aircraft?
Well, obviously, they want something that is able to be used rapidly without having to have a PhD attached to it. You want it to be, to go with your command and control center and be able to intercept the threats at a distance that's applicable and eliminate that threat. So their primary worries are: do we have enough power to run this? Do we have enough cooling capability to keep pull the heat away from the laser itself? And do we have the software technology developed so that we can track the targets, look at their trajectory, and be able to intercept them with a beam of light or microwave or whatever it may be? So their big concerns are: how do we make this plug and play? How do we swap one system out, that may be using, munitions to try to take down these threats, and put in something that's using light? The beauty of it is light doesn't cost you anything other than part of your power budget. You're not having to have a supply chain to bring up more munitions to keep your folks working in the field. It's a matter of, do you have enough energy to power the technology, and then the light, the depth of the munitions is infinite, and the cost is very, very low. So it's a matter of making sure that you have the power to run the technology.
And in terms of development, where are you right now, and what's kind of the next frontier? Is there anything you're stuck on, something you're looking to advance rapidly?
No, I mean, everything that we're trying to do right now is being done in a very methodical way. I mean, we've had 20 years of experience and seeing what's been done with the continuous wave lasers and the microwave platforms. There's a lot of infrastructure there that's already been funded by the U.S. government in terms of power supplies, tracking, the ability to see in front of you and be able to measure, the distortions in the atmosphere. So what we have to do is piggyback on what's already there, and as rapidly as possible field a technology that delivers the amount of energy in the pulse and puts that energy on target in an effective way. So we have technology that's all the way from fundamental science that we've started to trying to bridge the gap from initial field testing to getting onto a program of record where we can be part of that layered defense.
All right, looks like there's a lot going on. Greg, thank you for joining us, and we'll see what comes up next. And when we come back, some of the more interesting items buried in this year's defense budget. Welcome back. On this edition of Money Minute, Navy Federal Credit Union personal finance expert Jeanette Mack gives you some tactics on how to build or rebuild your credit.
Retirement is your time to enjoy the fruits of your long, hard labor over the course of your financial life. So making sure you're saving and investing when you can and following sound money strategies is critical to your end game. The number one thing that mystifies most people is exactly how much you need to comfortably retire. The most likely answer is more. Folks are living longer and more active lives in retirement. And think about it. If you retire in your mid-60s, you're looking at 20 to 30 years of retirement. Then factor housing and insurance costs, groceries, unpaid debt, the cost of living, and possible medical bills. It's a lot. So while you can, you should be investing. And if you're not, you're selling yourself short. The stock market offers great returns over time. Yes, there's risk involved, but there's also reward. Time is your best friend here, so don't wait too late to jump in. And don't skip talking with a financial advisor. They'll help customize a game plan that helps you win at retirement. Check with your bank or credit union. They may have free advisory and tools like retirement calculators and more. Building wealth happens over time, so use it wisely. In the end, you'll be glad you did.
Thanks, Jeanette. To get more of our coverage on military and defense topics, check out our headlines at Army, Navy, Air Force, Marine Corps Times.com, and DefenseNews.com. And to get a list of our top stories in your inbox, subscribe to our Early Bird Brief, and make sure to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. And when we come back, the annual military budget can sound like a dry topic, but dig in there deep enough and you'll find some strange items. Rare metals and nuclear bombs? Our Capitol Hill correspondent reports on some interesting items deep in the defense budget. This year's annual defense authorization bill has some interesting topics on the docket as lawmakers debate the 2023 military budget. Like, should the U.S. phase out some of its oldest nuclear weapons? What should the military do when a huge percentage of the rare metals it needs comes from an adversary like China? To dig into some of the more quizzical aspects of this year's negotiations, we spoke with Defense News' Capitol Hill correspondent Bryant Harris.
Congress recently wrapped up its initial work on the National Defense Authorization Act, known as the NDAA. On the table are some items this year that might seem a little out of the ordinary for congressional talks about military funding, like investment in rare mineral supplies. It may seem counterintuitive to include this as part of defense budget negotiations, but these minerals are needed to make everything from bullets to nuclear weapons to aircraft frames. The Senate wants to inject $1 billion into the national stockpile of critical minerals to shore up the defense supply chain. China controls the market for the majority of critical minerals, so if the US got into a conflict with China, Beijing could almost entirely cut off the supply of metals, including antimony. Without antimony, the United States cannot produce basic ammunition, from everything to bullets to Javelin anti-tank missiles. The National Defense Stockpile is meant to provide these minerals during an emergency like this. It's similar to the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, but Congress fears the National Defense Stockpile will become insolvent by 2025. The $1 billion cash influx for the stockpile in the Senate bill hopes to prevent this. The House bill would authorize a lower amount of $253 million. Both bills would give the Defense Department greater control of the national defense stockpile and would require a series of reports on minerals of particular concern in the supply chain. So, Congress and the Biden administration may be on the same page about shoring up the critical mineral stockpile, but the NDAA pushes back against the Biden administration's nuclear policies. Both the Senate and House bills reauthorize the Sea-Launched Cruise Missile Nuclear Development Program. The program is more commonly referred to by its acronym, SLCM-N. The Biden administration wants to cancel the program, and supporters of that position say putting nuclear weapons on attack submarines would undermine their mission without significantly enhancing the US nuclear posture. But Admiral Charles Richard, the head of Strategic Command, has come out in favor of SLCM-N. He has defended the program to Congress in multiple letters and hearings, arguing it's necessary to boost nuclear deterrence against Russia and China. The Senate NDAA would also slow walk the Biden administration's attempts to retire the B-83 nuclear gravity bomb. The bomb is 80 to 100 times more powerful than the bomb that the United States dropped on Hiroshima. The bill requires a study on potential capabilities to strike a hard and deeply buried target before retiring the B-83. The United States doesn't have any conventional weapons capable of striking that kind of target, and the B-83 supporters say it's needed for that kind of mission. But Biden administration officials have said the B-83 does not address the issue, so the fate of those bombs is still up in the air. Finally, the House NDAA reauthorizes the Small Business Administration's Innovation Research Grant Program. The Defense Department accounts for the majority of these grants, which totaled $3.3 billion in 2019. The grants are intended to help companies and research institutions develop promising new technologies. These debates and funding discrepancies will continue throughout the year as the NDAA heads to the floor for votes before House and Senate negotiators agree on a compromise bill. The House is expected to vote on the NDAA in July, with the Senate likely to follow later this year. For more on these topics, you can check out our coverage on defensenews.com. For Defense News, I'm Bryant Harris.
Thank you, Bryant. And that's all we have time for this week. Please visit us on militarytimes.com and defensenews.com for more coverage. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next week.